Hi. So I've gone through a lot more of the comments that were left for me on my reply to ex-Mormon person, whatever. And a lot of the comments, people were feeling that I'm very naive and they wish me well and that I need to find out the truth and all these things. And so I just wanted to clarify a little bit and tell you why, knowing all these things, that I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a Mormon, as people have referred to it. So a lot of the things that people have brought up, I definitely know about. I'm not naive. I know about the beginnings of the church and things that are controversial to a lot of people, particularly things that they've kind of picked apart on Joseph Smith personally. And those things never bothered me because I always saw him as a man, a very young man, to be precise, when he began this journey. And when he asked the question, which church do I join? He was very interested in the churches and the religions and the different sects that were occurring in his area. And he really wanted to know which church to join. I mean, his mother was a member of one, and his brother was another member of one, so his family was even split in which churches they had joined. And so he really wanted to find out the truth. So I believe that he was a prophet, and just like prophets of old, they aren't perfect. I don't think prophets are chosen necessarily because they are perfect. I think they are the people that are willing to be pliable in the hands of the Lord and are willing to take on the task that needs to be completed, whatever that is. Now, in the instance of Jonah, he wasn't really willing, but maybe he was what was available. And the Lord knew that eventually he would do it. But there are lots of prophets that have made imperfect choices. Obviously, they're all sinners, every one of them. Abraham, Moses, they're all imperfect, and we don't know everything about their lives because we don't have as much information about it. But Joseph Smith, obviously, he's in more modern times, and there was a lot more written about him and a lot of scrutiny towards him. But I just imagine the best people I know. For instance, my father is a very good man. And if people came in and wanted to pick apart his entire life, they could find some things and twist them and just put light on those things to try and tarnish his name, even though he's been a great man. And I can't think of very many things that they could get on him at all, but I do know that he's an imperfect man, and obviously there are things. And same thing with the apostles and prophets that have been called throughout time. So I just look at it as the church is imperfect. There are everyone in the church is imperfect. We're just people. We're just human. However, in our church, we volunteer. Every position that we're asked to fulfill we can say no. It's a volunteer position. No one's getting paid. There's nothing in it for us. It's just what we do because we want to help in any way we can, giving of our time and talents. That's why I do it, and I mean, that's why Joseph Smith did it. He gained nothing. He didn't get to keep the gold plates. He didn't get to gain any money from it. He moved around like a vagabond, just at the mercy of others, being taken in by others. At one point, he had a house with his wife, Emma, and they had started industry. They had a farm of maple trees, and they started a maple syrup company, and they were making money, and she was doing silk rugs or something to that effect. I saw what they were. I can't remember exactly what it's called. But anyway, he received revelation that he needed to stop doing those things and stop worrying about making money for himself and just do the things that the Lord wanted him to do. So he gave that up and spent his entire life dedicated to building up the church and getting the things together that he was instructed to do. One of the things, obviously, and the most important thing, was the Book of Mormon. And on one of the comments, someone had said something about, oh, we found out he plagiarized the Book of Mormon because there are the same things in the New Testament as in the Book of Mormon, and some of the same grammatical errors, she said. I don't know what she means by that, because I've read both, and there aren't a lot of grammatical errors. Maybe things were spelled slightly differently. I mean, the language is a little different. I have the King James Version, and, the language isn't exactly the way it is now. She said, well, does that mean he had revelation that was mistakes, just like the New Testament? Well, clearly that person doesn't understand what the Book of Mormon is. The Book of Mormon wasn't a revelation to Joseph Smith. The Book of Mormon was a record that was already kept by other prophets. Joseph Smith didn't write any of it. He translated it. So the gift of revelation was the gift basically of tongues, was that he was able to translate the Book of Mormon. And then there are other people that say, well, he looked through a hat and he had a stone. So I'll tell a little story about that. So I went on a trip last year to visit all the historical sites where Joseph Smith had lived and where the church had been prominent throughout the Midwest and New York City, or not New York, upstate New York and Pennsylvania. So I went to some of these places, and one of the most impactful places that I went was Harmony, Pennsylvania, where Joseph Smith was a newlywed with his wife Emma, and they were living on the property of her family, in their own little residence on the property. So this house, where he started translating the gold plates, and Emma was helping him at the time. She was the scribe, and she would write the words that he said. And he would sit, it showed the window, he would sit right next to a window on a small table, and she would sit on one side of the table and he'd sit on the other side of the table, dictating to her what to write. And he had a hat that he would look through. I mean, logically, it seems like that was blocking out the sun. If he was looking through a seer stone, which is something that he'd used previously and supposedly was pretty good at seeing things through the seer stone. It was something that was used back then. Anyway, it was probably just a physical thing that helped him feel comfortable with translating. And God is like, that's fine. That's something that you feel helps you, and that's fine. It probably wasn't something that was necessary in God's point of view, but to Joseph, it was just something that he was comfortable with. Anyway, I don't see any problem with that. People make a big deal about he was looking through a hat at a stone, and anyway, whatever. Who am I to judge? Anyway, so he translated the Book of Mormon in a matter of 3 months, a couple months. If anyone's read the Book of Mormon, there's no way I could have written that story in 3 months. Besides the fact that people that testified that he would be quoting what to write, he wasn't an educated man, for one thing, and he was reading these stories off the top of his head, and it would be completely incoherent. You'd have to sit there with research, and he didn't have the Bible or the New Testament next to him that he was copying from or getting ideas from. I just think that it's highly implausible, if nothing else. So anyway, when I was in that room, imagining him translating the Book of Mormon and his wife sitting there and seeing this window, when I stood in that room, of all the places that I saw and that I learned about while I was there, I felt the Spirit more strongly than I ever had in my life. at that moment. I was thinking about him translating and what had transpired there, and I had the distinct thought and sight of my son in my head. And he had passed away a few months before that. This was a trip he'd really wanted to take, and we had planned it for the spring, and we went without him. He passed away in July, and we went on this trip in April of the next year. Anyway, I'd prayed that he would be with us because he had really wanted to take this trip. And this was the one day where I felt him with us. And so I see him in my mind, in my mind's eye, and I just pictured him smiling and just telling me, this is true. This happened, Mom. And I felt from my head to my toe the most beautiful, overwhelming feeling of the Spirit testifying to me through my son and through the Spirit that this had happened and this was true. Anyway, till my dying day, I will never be able to deny and forget how I felt that day and what I felt in my heart. So many things like that have happened to me while reading the Bible as well as the Book of Mormon, telling me that this gospel is true. And a lot of times I will separate the gospel from the church. Now, the church has the gospel, but it doesn't mean that the church itself is perfect. And I would challenge everyone, what church is perfect from the beginning of time? I don't know that any church has been scrutinized more than this church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, possibly the Catholic Church, which also from the beginning has had lots of controversy and lots of men that sinned, and that is human nature. That's what happens. But I believe Joseph Smith asked for the answer. He was there at the right time, and he was willing to take on the responsibility. That is why he was prophet, not because he was some extra, just amazing human being. Although I do think he was a very good person. From what I've read, I mean, he gave everything he had was to help people in the church and to do things that he thought he was supposed to be doing. So, of course, he made mistakes along the way, and the stuff people say about him, digging for gold or whatever. I mean, come on. He was very poor and young at the time, and you know what I mean? I don't blame him for that. He was looking for money, so be it, It was frivolous, and it wasn't what God wanted him to be doing. And he realized, and he was chastised for that. And he realized over time that wasn't what he should be doing. Anyway, what else can I say? I know a lot of the things that people are saying, and I don't judge them for their experiences. Those are the things they've experienced and the journey that they're on. And I respect everyone's right to believe what they want to believe. And I also appreciate people sharing what they believe and what they think is true. It doesn't offend me whatsoever. I'm a very open-minded person. And I do look for the truth. I don't just believe things at face value, and I never just believe what my parents told me. Believe me, I was pretty rebellious, and I'm very independent and independent-minded. And I definitely don't just believe things people tell me. I 100% go by the Spirit. I'm very intuitive, and I'm very sensitive. Not only just to spiritual things, but just when I meet people, I can sense goodness and intent. And I've always felt that's kind of a gift. I think my mom has the same thing. I love everyone, but I'm very wary, and I'm not very trusting. I give everyone the benefit of the doubt, but I'm always watchful, and I just can tell people's intent. So same thing with the church. The people that I've met, and I've met a lot of leaders in the church, I mean apostles, and haven't met this prophet personally, but they are good people, and they volunteer their lives, and a lot of them were affluent and had great careers which they retired from or gave up completely. A lot of them would just volunteer their time while being a doctor or an attorney or whatever they happen to be, and just volunteer so much time to the church and what was in it for them. I mean, they don't make any money from it. It's very stressful. My father did it his whole life, and it took him away from the family quite a bit. The church has cut back on that time away from the family. They want fathers to be able to be there more, and mothers. So in our callings, we try and cut back on meetings and things of that nature, because the family is the most important thing, and that's where it starts. One other thing I would address is the culture of the church, which I don't disagree at all with a lot of the comments made. That's one of the reasons my husband and I do not live in Utah. I live in Southern California. He grew up in Utah. I grew up in the Northwest, where there weren't a lot of members of the church. And I liked it that way, because you have to stand for something. You have to find out who you are. And there's a lot of diversity, and you learn to live and accept other people, live with and accept other people that have completely different experiences and beliefs as you do. And I think any community or any place like that has a high concentration of any one religion or belief is not optimal. Just, I don't think so. Because when everyone is kind of working towards the same goal and kind of has the same standards that they're trying to live by, I think it's easy to become kind of judgmental or critical of yourself, looking at other people, seeing where they're at, and just thinking, oh, I'm not good enough, or that person's not doing what they need to be doing. That is not of God. And that's not how disciples of Christ should be living. And unfortunately, I think it becomes a little competitive when people are around so many people who are going towards the same goal. It's nice to live in neighborhoods where there's people from all different places, different religions, and you can learn a lot, and you become very tolerant and less judgmental. And for me, it's helped a lot. My husband did grow up in Utah and experienced that, trying to keep up with the Joneses type mentality. And unfortunately, that's how it is a lot of times. I would say more in Salt Lake Valley area than smaller places in Utah Valley. And I don't know, it just seems to be a little bit more, I don't know, just competitive and materialistic. And I didn't like it. I lived there for a few years, and I did not want to raise my children there, and I didn't want to live there. So I understand where people are coming from in that aspect, definitely. But the culture is not the gospel. It's just imperfect people trying to do their best. And it's very unfortunate that people feel like they need to compare themselves to others, or that they won't be good enough. But that has nothing to do with the gospel. That's just people being human and, getting caught up in a culture that isn't healthy. So I completely agree with that, and that's where I'm coming from. But I do have a testimony that this gospel, the gospel of Jesus Christ that was restored through Joseph Smith, is true. I know it with all my heart. I have felt it to an undeniable degree, that I'm not closed-minded. I see what is out there, and I'm very critical. I'm a critical thinker, and I don't just take things at face value or what people tell me. I use my mind, and I also use the Spirit. And this is the conclusion that I've come to at this point. And I will continue learning and looking for truth. There's so much I don't know, so many things I don't know about the gospel and that I don't understand about, just gospel doctrines. But that doesn't bother me. I'm okay with that because I know that the gospel is true. Whether or not I know all of it or understand all of it doesn't matter. I'm continuing to learn, and I don't even think the smartest person in the world knows very much. There's so little that God has told us because we just can't even comprehend this. Look at us not even be able to understand or interpret the Bible, and it's difficult. We don't know a whole lot. Anyway, but I don't judge other people, and anyone that is trying to follow in the ways of Jesus is a disciple of Christ. I firmly believe that. And if other people in my church don't think that, well, then they don't know the gospel very well. That's it. And we're all at different stages. Everyone's at different stages in this world. And I think anyone who's striving to be like Christ is doing what they can. And that's what you can do. I have nothing but love for my fellow man, everyone in this world. And that's what I strive to do in becoming more like Jesus, is just feel the love that he has for everyone. Anyway, this is my testimony, and I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ, my Savior. Amen.